Hello, and welcome to the 5 warning signs that your star performer just might be burning out. This is Dr. Geri Puleo, the President and CEO of Change Management Solutions, and my focus is to help eradicate workplace burnout. Now, why would I want to eradicate workplace burnout? Well, maybe some of these statistics will help you understand. Did you know that 80% of Americans feel job stress? That's 4 out of 5 workers are feeling the stress, and 25% of workers view their job as the number one stressor in their lives. In addition, half of all workers are having trouble managing their stress. I mean, when you're stressed out, you try to do something to overcome it, but 50% of American workers need help from their companies to help them manage their job-related stress. And 26% of American workers self-describe that they are often or very often burned out by their work. And this is probably one of the most important things to consider when you're wondering, what difference does it make if my star performer is burning out? Well, 75% of all employees are actively or considering looking for a new job. So identifying the warning signs of a star performer who is burning out can become a really important tool for you to not only maintain productivity, performance, and quality, but also to retain that star performer. So, can you risk losing a star performer? The star performers are the workers that companies tend to rely on. They seem to have high energy, high quality, high commitment, high engagement, and your customers tend to like them. But what happens if you lose that star performer, or if your star performer is so burned out that they're considering leaving you and maybe going to your competition? So let's talk about 5 warning signs. The first one is if you notice your star performer is becoming tardy or late or has increasing absenteeism. Now, we're not talking about the vacation that they planned and that they approved through management. What we're talking about are those unscheduled or unexcused absences, the surprise times that the employee is just no longer showing up. Now, when you talk about absences, you need to understand what the legal definition is. And basically, it's an employee is absent anytime they're not present at work during a normally scheduled work period. Now, the other thing that you need to look into is that these absences are considered short-term if the employee is not at work for up to 4 weeks, or it may be long-term if it's over 4 weeks. Now, we're not looking at the warning signs of tardiness, lateness, or absenteeism if, they're just an hour or two late occasionally, or they take an unplanned day off. The thing that you're looking for is a pattern, and it's in pattern of increasing tardiness, lateness, or absenteeism. So one of the warning signs you need to look for is if your star performer is working very long work hours, because studies have shown that employees who are working excessive hours, especially if you're talking over 60 hours per week, these employees tend to take the so-called sanity days off, or they increase their absenteeism. Now, an occasional sanity day is okay to help you relieve stress, but if it becomes a pattern and it's long term because the employee is so burned out, then you've really got a problem. So your red flag is this increase in uncompensated absences. And it's not just that the star performer is not at work, it's also that if they're burned out, it's taking them longer to complete routine tasks. So, because they're so committed and engaged, they tend to work more hours, which stresses them out more, burns them out more, exhausts them more, and the result is increased absences. So, the stress is the number one reason that employees take long-term absences or absences over 4 weeks. So if your star performer is taking more time off, it's time for you to start looking at burnout as a potential cause. Now here's the second warning sign. And this is the intention to find a new job. As I mentioned, 75% of U.S. workers are considering or actively looking for a new job. So the probability that your star performer is looking is pretty high. And the other thing that you have to consider is that star performers are known in their industries and in their fields. So they have networks and reputations that enhance their job search. Finding a new job may not be so difficult for a star performer as it is for one of your B or C player employers. So, the question is, how do you know if the star performer is actively or just passively looking for a new job? Now, when I'm talking about passive job searches, we're talking about recruiters checking out their LinkedIn profiles and then approaching them about job opportunities. And believe me, if a star performer is burned out with what they're doing for you, they're going to at least listen to what this recruiter is saying. So here's your warning sign. If you find in your discussions with your star performers that they're questioning their contribution to the organization and the meaning and importance of their work and even their place in the organization, both now and in the future, this just may be an indication that they're really not satisfied with their job, that something is wrong. And this is kind of a light way of saying, I think I might be looking for something else, and what are you going to do to keep me here and to decrease my stress levels? The other thing is listen to your employee grapevine. You know, no matter how confidential you want to keep things, there is an office grapevine. So if you hear rumblings in the employee grapevine that one of your star performers has talked to a recruiter or has been going on some interviews or has been giving any kind of an indication that they're looking, listen to that grapevine. And always remember that if you don't have an employee contract, any employee might be looking for a new job. And 33% of employees want to change jobs within the next 6 months. So if you see any warning signs that your star performer is looking for a new job, you need to take action immediately. So let's take a look at a third warning sign. You know, one of the things that's so great about star performers and that makes them so valuable to an organization is that these are usually very creative, highly innovative, and extremely engaged employees who care about their work and go that extra mile. So if you see suddenly a decrease in the number of ideas, creativity, or innovation that they're bringing to the job, you may be seeing some of the warning signs. In fact, if you see that your star performer has changed, they don't go the extra mile, but they are not performing, they're just meeting the bare minimum performance standards. And think about it, a star performer who suddenly pulls back like that does it for a reason. And one of the reasons is that burnout has been known to impair cognitive functioning on a physiological level, which means they have trouble solving problems, they have problems making decisions, and they may be psychologically and physiologically unable to be creative problem solvers because they are so burned out. Now, burnout is an extreme form of stress. I call it the uber stress, so to speak. And when an employee has fewer ideas and insights, you got to ask, is this due to the cognitive impairment of burnout, or have they checked out? In other words, are they apathetic? In my BDOC model, the precursor to a full-blown burnout is comprised of 3 steps. Usually employees start with high hope, but then based on what's going on within their work environment, with their colleagues, with their managers, and with the job itself, they become increasingly frustrated, angry, and apathetic. The apathy is what precedes immediately a full-blown burnout. So if they've checked out and are apathetic, there's a very good sign that your star performer is burned out. So your warning sign you have to check out is, are they beginning to limit their ideas or insights into problems or challenges. And there's one other thing that you need to look at with this. Is it that they're cognitively impaired and they just can't think creatively anymore? Or are they consciously refusing to participate because they no longer care and are apathetic? So your big red flag here is if a star performer suddenly becomes passive or non-participative in meetings. Because remember, creativities require recovery in order to maintain that level of creativity. So, and star performers have to have this recovery time in order for them to be creative. So if you've hit them with a huge workload that they have no time off and they're constantly doing, and not recharging, then basically your work practices might be burning out this star. Now let's take a look at the fourth warning sign. And this is an increase or a beginning of interpersonal conflicts at work. And these can be interpersonal conflicts across all stakeholders. The star performer is having trouble getting along with team members or coworkers. They are becoming rude or angry with their subordinates. They're lashing out at bosses, or they're just not caring and being angry with their customers. Now, one of the things that's really interesting about interpersonal conflict at work, I mean, you have to ask, why can't we just all get along? The biggest problem is that studies have shown that the average U.S. worker spends 2.1 hours every week dealing with some type of workplace conflict. And what they've found that if an employee takes an unscheduled absence, remember we talked about that as one of the first warning signs that your star performer might be burning out, it usually follows some type of a conflict with a worker. And employees need that sanity day, or things are getting too tough in dealing with some of the people they work with, so they take a day off. Now, the warning sign for these interpersonal conflicts, there are none. Are you surprised? I mean, usually when you see two employees really going at it and screaming at one another, that's the end of a very long process. In reality, 95% of workers, or basically every worker, will not overtly acknowledge nor address the source of their conflict. So in other words, workers will kind of hold it in, or they don't want to make waves even though the conflicts are beginning to escalate. So what you have to look at is, what's your relationship like with your star performer? I mean, studies have shown that 25% of employees leave if they can't get along with their supervisors. So if you're having some conflicts with the star performer, there's a good probability, or a 1 in 4 chance, that they will be looking for employment elsewhere. And 15% of employees have actually left companies solely because they are not getting along with their bosses. And here's the really scary thing. 80% of employees admit that they are dissatisfied with their direct managers. So really start analyzing and interpreting how your relationship is with your star performer. Now, your red flag is if it escalates. In other words, are there disruptive outbursts or actual violence going on? When I did my research on burnout during organizational change in order to create the BDOC model, one of my participants, who is a very logical, laid-back guy, was so burned out that he and one of his coworkers got into such an argument that the pictures on the walls were all skewed. Now, it wasn't physical violence, but that is some pretty violent emotional and interpersonal communication outburst. So here's the thing that you have to worry about the interpersonal conflict, especially since basically every worker will not admit that there is a problem with communication. Disengagement is the silent cost of workplace conflict. In other words, employees will disengage or no longer care if they're in a workplace that they find to be extremely conflicted and they're having trouble with their coworkers. And then we finally come to the fifth warning sign of burnout in a star performer. And this is when they suddenly start missing deadlines or due dates. Now, part of the problem here is that there is this misguided belief that you have to create a sense of urgency in the workplace. In other words, it has to be unrelenting. It's not just important, it's urgent. So that gets the adrenaline pumping, and everybody puts forth more than they normally do, and it's urgent and it's great, and etc., etc., etc. Well, here's the problem. That sense of urgency works because it creates an adrenaline flow and cortisol surging through your body, which gives you that extra boost so that you can do 110%. But the problem is that human beings can't handle those types of surges on an ongoing basis. In fact, it ends up hurting them. And when there's these missed deadlines or due dates, in addition to looking at that urgency mindset that says everything is important, because let's face it, when everything's important, then nothing is prioritized and nothing is important, you need to start looking beyond the workplace. In other words, check out your star performer's work-life balance or that urgency mindset. If there is, if they feel that they cannot do what they need to do for their family because of work demands, then there's probably an imbalance between their work life and their personal life. And if there's an urgency mindset, check whether it's something that the organizational culture is urging or whether it's self-imposed. A lot of star performers tend to use that urgency mindset to get them revved up. So always take a look at what's going on at work and outside of work. And the other thing is, star performers can handle a big workload. They're usually very good at time management. But here's the thing. You can't micromanage them. Star performers can only really perform if they have the control over how they are going to meet those high demands. And they need to have control over not only just what they do, but when they do it and how they do it. So a lot of times in companies, when there's an urgency mindset, there's this micromanaging that you want to know everything and you try to control your star performers. You need to give them a little bit of slack there so that they can find the best way for them to do the work and meet your deadlines. So the warning sign here is if you see your star performer working harder and longer, but they're not achieving the desired results, that is a big warning sign that your star performer might be burning out. Because remember, they're going to become increasingly frustrated that all their hard work is not leading to the results that they have been looking for. So your red flag is if it goes to the extreme. Remember I said the preliminary stages to burnout are frustration, anger, and apathy? If they become apathetic about a missed deadline, you know that they are on the brink of a burnout. So take a look at their workload. A heavy workload contributes to about 46% of all the workplace stress. So here's what we have to finish off with. There is no one clear path to burnout. People manage stress differently. And stress is a highly personalized phenomenon, and it can vary widely, even in identical situations, for different reasons. Now, this quote by the American Institute of Stress really helps managers understand that you cannot manage or lead all employees, especially your star performers, in the same way. They are going to react, interpret, and feel the experiences of stress in very, very different ways. So, what you need to do is you need to strive to build an open, trusting, and respectful relationship with your star performers so that you can identify those early warning signs and avoid the extreme red flags of burnout. Remember, 95% of employees are not going to talk about conflict, and star performers tend not to admit when they're burning out. In fact, that's one of the preliminary stages leading into burnout. So, address the issues early, make the necessary changes, and in that way you can retain your star performer so that they don't go to your competitor. Good luck!